everyone, and welcome to another Scots Way Hey podcast. And today I'm joined by Rachel McCormack, who's a writer, a broadcaster and food expert, and who has just had a book published, Chasing the Dram. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
So let's talk about the fabulous book, Chasing the Dram. How would you explain it to people? Because it's a little bit different from perhaps a normal whisky book, if there is such a thing.
Well, I think a normal whisky book nowadays is very much about whisky and about process, and it's very much an encyclopedic book where you really learn about whisky. My interest in whisky was almost more cultural.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to write a book just about whisky, and I didn't want to write a book just about cooking with whisky. I kind of wanted to write about what whisky meant to Scotland, but not in a way that was really academic, because I'm not an academic writer. So I suppose it's best described as like a whisky travelogue with recipes. If you are a whisky expert, you won't really learn anything from the book, but you can see what we think of you, because there's an entire wee whisky geek world where they all know each other and they all know everything about whisky, and they think that they're normal, and I'm not exactly convinced that they are, in the way that people who are really, really, really into something aren't really that normal.
Yes. And that's the thing I got, first of all, there's this myth, there's a lot of myths and you bust a lot of them, which I really like, that whisky, a bit like wine, but more so, is only for those that know, and if you don't, then, you know, it's basically for getting drunk on or something like that.
Well, I think the thing with whisky is that, I think it's like anything, it's like wine. If you like a whisky that 6 months after you start learning about whisky, so in January you like whisky A, and by June you think, I don't like that whisky anymore, I know a lot more, I don't think that's any good, that's fine, but you were enjoying it in January, and in January all you've got is January, you're not in June. So I didn't want to say this is a better whisky than another, because I don't think that's true. I think there's an educated palate that can tell between a different whisky. You know, if you just like peated whisky, then really drinking a lot of sherry cask whisky is a waste of your time. But if you know an awful lot more, you can tell between one peated whisky and another. But if you don't, you've only got the night, that night you're drinking whisky, and you could learn more and change your mind. But that's the good thing about whisky, is you don't have to say this is the one I like, and 10 years later this is the one I have to drink. There's a lot of whiskies, you can drink what you want. And
you know, your palates change, and everything, you know, tastes change in general anyway.
Well, I mean, it changes. I mean, to me, I notice it changes to me like on different days. Like sometimes I'm drinking a 40% whiskey and I don't want any water in it, and other days I'm like, oh, this is like just rasping my throat, and I don't know if it's because it's what I've eaten, or if it's because of what the temperature of the weather's like, or I really genuinely don't know what the difference is. I'm sure like a scientist would be able to tell me, but it's just, you know, you've kind of got what you've got that day.
So the first taste of whisky that you talk about in the book was when your dad used to give you Macallan and hot toddies, which rather special hot toddies, I have to say.
I don't think my dad had very much whisky in the house apart from Macallan, because that was the one that he liked, and he had a really bad cold, and I do remember him one day when I did this cold for about a week and I couldn't shift it. He was like, I'm going to do in this whisky, but I need to give you this hot toddy. And this idea of ruining whisky is a really interesting concept, that you could ruin a whisky by adding stuff to it. It's a real cultural concept that in the Mediterranean you'd find with food, in a way that people get really offended when you do their food wrong. Yeah,
when you do a twist to it.
Oh, they do not like that. I mean, if you don't know if you'll remember, probably nobody else in Britain does, especially not in Scotland, but Jamie Oliver did a recipe for a paella that he put in a normal pot, and it had chorizo in it, and the Spanish just went crazy. I mean, it was like a national scandal that Jamie Oliver had done this to their paella, in a way that I can't imagine us being in any way insulted if somebody did something with black pudding.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
That we'd think, well, that wasn't very nice, but we wouldn't have a scandal about it, in a way that whisky people would go, no, it's a scandal. People are that I'm drinking it wrong, in a way that Spanish people, I think the whole of the Mediterranean, would be like, you're eating my food wrong. You know, I come from this village in Italy, this is how we do this dish with asparagus, and if you try and do it and you add this and that ingredient, you're not doing our dish, you're doing something else. Don't tell people you're doing our dish. And we don't do that about food at all, but we definitely do it about whisky.
So that idea of, well, I'm going to have a piece of ice in this whisky, and someone would just go, well, I'm not giving you it then, because you're just going to ruin it for yourself.
Which is really, I find it really an interesting way of looking that we have a drink culture as opposed to a food culture that if you look at the idea of conviviality and sharing, which I kind of put quite a bit in the book,
yes,
about that kind of thing of, if you go to someone Spanish's house, they'll pour you a glass of wine and they'll open the fridge and they'll give you what they've got. Our idea of conviviality really is drink, and it really is originated in whiskey, that you give someone a whiskey. It's a different thing from even nowadays from even giving them a glass of wine or a gin and tonic or some food.
Yeah.
I mean, I was with somebody recently in the Pot Still, and I had seen a whiskey that I wanted to have, Kilcowan whiskey.
Right.
And it's one of the wee distilleries on Islay, quite new ones, and she's from Islay and her dad's from near Ardbeg distillery, so she always drinks Ardbeg. And so she was looking at this Kilcoman whiskey and she said, "Oh, I've never had that before. That's the farm beside so-and-so's house and up that wee road. I heard they were doing a distillery." And I said, "Well, I'll get this one, and why don't you get another one?" And she went, no, let's get the same one. Let's share the same one." And I thought, you'd never say that about gin. You'd never say that about wine. If we were in a restaurant, you'd never say, "Let's get the same dish and partake of the same
Yes,
thing."
yeah.
It was almost in her DNA, and I don't even think she knew what she was doing. It was like, let's partake of the same, of like two
So
whiskies, the same whiskey, so we're sharing this together.
I think it's interesting. Do you also think it maybe goes back to that time, because we didn't have a lot of whiskey in the house when I was a kid, and certainly when I talked to my mum about having a bottle of whiskey in the house, it was like, well, we had one for the year because it was so expensive, and it was seen as a special thing.
It was 2 weeks' wages.
Yeah, so this
whiskey.
idea that you would give someone a whiskey, it was like, well, this is break out the good stuff, you know. The vicar's coming round, let's have something like that.
I think there is that, but I wonder if that is earlier, because I think, you know, if you look at I mean, the only other place that I know really is Spain, mostly Catalonia, and if you look at a lot of that conviviality idea with food, it does definitely come from a peasant tradition,
right.
and it made me wonder if our peasant tradition is much more to do with giving a whiskey, because whiskey was what you did with your leftover barley.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
it might be even that old, as opposed to from the post-war, or even like the post sort of, or the Industrial Revolution. It might be really, really old traditions that are just kind of put in people's DNA, that to the point where, I mean, everybody in Scotland's got a whiskey story. Anybody listening that says, "I don't have a whiskey story," you go, "Well, where was your school?" "Oh, my school was right opposite such and such an office, and my dad used to do it, or my uncle, or my mum," and everybody has a whiskey story in Scotland, even when they think they don't.
I remember the first time going back to Macallan, I think it was the first malt that I ever tasted, and I just started working in a restaurant as a 17-year-old pot washer, and afterwards said, "Well, try this," and I remember trying it and going, "Oh, that's better than Glen's or whatever I'd tried previously." But then they gave me a Lafroig to taste. Mm-hmm. It was almost like testing a new kid or something like that, and I thought, "Oh, that's disgusting, I'm never going to drink that again," and you know, go forward for almost 30 years now, and that's the you know, the as you say, the peatier strength. That is how a palate has changed over the years, and kind of and appreciated different tastes. Because if you'd gone back to me, I thought, I can't drink this stuff. It's like, you know, Turks or whatever that people say about the really peaty whiskies. But yet, over the years, it really has changed quite a lot.
But I think, you know, people's palates do change, and you know, people's education about food does change. But what my experience of Macallan was, because it was the only one that my dad really had in the house, when I was about 17, and I was about 17 and a half, and you know, you go into like a pub when you're 17 and a half and nobody knows you, and you're pretending you're 18, and you think you're getting a drink here, nobody's IDing you, it's brilliant. And I thought, oh, I'll have a whiskey, because like, I like whiskey in the house, because that's the problem when you're like underage in a pub, you don't even know what to ask for. And I never liked beer. People would normally ask for beer, but I never liked that. So I'm going, well, what do I have? I'll have a whiskey. So I had a whiskey, and I came home, and the next day I said to my dad, you know, I had a whiskey in the pub last night, Dad, and it was really not very nice. It wasn't like the whiskey that you give me. And my dad just looked at me and said, oh God, what have I done?
Well, it didn't put you off.
No, but it kind of made me realise there were whiskies and then there were whiskies.
Yeah.
And I still have that thing now. I mean, I spent about 2 years researching on this book, and I still have that thing. Even now, I've got almost that kind of cellular memory, in inverted commas, that when you give me a Macallan, I'm like, yeah, that is to me what original whiskey should be. Everything else, I absolutely love a big range of whiskies, and I wouldn't always choose a Macallan anymore, but still there's still a part of me going, yeah, that's what whiskey tastes like, because that was the first one I had.
So going back to the book, she said it's a travelogue, but it's also a recipe book as well, which really interested me. And some quite unusual recipes. You've got venison biryani, the one where you're injecting into the lamb.
Do you know what? I put that one in for a laugh because I didn't think anybody would do it, and it's an Alice B. Tolkien recipe. She wrote a book. Alice B. Tolkien wrote a book. I wrote a cookbook. And one of the things I had in it, I think, was hash fudge. Right. So it's never been out of print because everybody wants Alice B. Tolkien's hash fudge recipe. But this lamb was a recipe that she says that she bribed a provincial French surgeon's cook to get. And you get this lamb and you inject it with half orange and half brandy for about 8 days while you've got it in a load of red wine marinating. And then I found it in... what's his name? He wrote the Plagiarist Cookbook. He used to be a big reviewer. He writes a lot about architecture. Now the name I cannot remember. It's going to annoy me. Jonathan Mead's.
Oh yes.
Jonathan Mead's book wrote this cookbook called The Plagiarist in the Kitchen.
Right.
And he said he got this recipe off her. He changed it slightly, and I was looking at it thinking that is mad. I mean, who is going to inject half whiskey, half orange juice? And I thought, you know what, I am going to go and try this and see what it's like. And it was actually really nice. I can't imagine anybody actually doing it. But I just thought there are recipes I think you put in where you think everybody can do this recipe.
Yeah.
And there are other recipes you put in going, that's just quite mad. But because again, what I thought was interesting was there is absolutely no tradition in Scotland of cooking with whiskey.
Absolutely.
There's nothing.
Yeah. Cranachan, I was trying to think about this, and I thought when I used to cook professionally, I thought, what did I make with whiskey? Whiskey sauce, Cranachan, I think I did a kind of whiskey souffle or something, chocolate. There was sometimes you'd add it to a chocolate pot or something like that, chocolate mousse, but that's about it.
But those are all new. They're as in terms of they're not. They're from the 1970s. Because if you look at what's her name, Marion McNeil has that book, The Scots Kitchen, that she published in the 30s about recipes that were going to be lost, and she published a Cranachan recipe and it has flavouring in it. It doesn't have whiskey. It has no whiskey. The only whiskey that she had put in was something that you had after the harvest, where you got oats and you had a mixture of ale and whiskey, and you put that in the oats and you went off and finished the harvest and came back, and then you had to eat this stuff, which just looked vile, so I never did it. But that was the only thing. And if you look at Norman cooking, there's a load of Calvados. I mean, I have this friend whose mother was from Normandy, and she's a chef in Lancashire, and she always, you ever get a recipe from Sodi, and it's like put a flutter of Calvados in this, and like, why do you put Calvados in everything? And she said, well, my mum's from Normandy, of course I do that. And when you look at old 19th century recipes from Spain and from the south of France, they interchange brandy and wine.
You put brandy,
you put wine, and we never ever did any of that. And
again, do you think that was because this reverential nature of how people looked at whiskey? They thought it was a bit like putting it in your hot toddy. It's a waste to put it into food.
I think we think it's a waste because we don't do it. I think it's the other way around.
Right.
I think we didn't do it because of the tax went on it so quickly that any kind of industry with whiskey, any kind of making whiskey was illegal and could make you money, could actually make you cash. Why were you going to pour something into food that you were making when you could actually make some precious coins out of it? And also you were doing something that was illegal. It wasn't a home industry. Because if you look at a lot of the recipes with brandy or with Calvados, they're very much 19th century farm recipes.
Yeah.
People were just distilling Calvados and brandy on a small scale, the same way they were maybe making wine at a local cooperative, because there wasn't massive tax. There was hardly any tax. Sometimes there was no tax at all on these things. In a way, that wasn't happening in Scotland very, very quickly. So you were making something that became, I think, culturally very precious, because you'd either be you wouldn't just be pouring it in food.
Yes.
You'd have to keep it specifically for drinking, or you'd be making money out of it.
Yeah. So a lot of these recipes, their origins aren't in Scotland,
No, I mean, I would say none of them are, just because there aren't any. So what I really wanted to do was, there are a few cookbooks about cooking with whiskey, but they're mostly done by chefs, and they're mostly quite complex, or they're very specific about the kind of whiskey they want you to put in.
Right.
And they're great, but if you're going to have a tradition, if you're going to create a tradition, because I mean, you know, essentially all traditions are invented. I mean, my experience of Spain was you'd go to some big village fiesta that you looked like had been going for 1,000 years, and it turned out it started in 1964. Or like 1981, but no one cared. It was becoming a tradition to go to that town or that village for that event. And if you look at us with tartan and bagpipes, I mean, that's a total invention from Victorian times. So I thought, well, we just invent a tradition. All traditions are invented, let's invent one. So let's invent a tradition of cooking with whiskey. So with that, I thought I didn't put in a lot of recipes, but I thought I needed to put in enough that some might be a bit more demanding. I mean, I've got a recipe that I never even tasted for macarons, because Helen Vass gave me that, and she's like Scotland's best pastry chef, and her recipe was really exact. And I mean, I've made macarons once, and I'm never doing that again as long as I live.
If you don't have to make a macaron, don't.
They are a total faff. But somebody somewhere might want to make one, and if not, they want to look at the recipe and go, I'm really grateful for that recipe, Rachel, because I am never making them, but I am going to buy them, and I'm going to appreciate the effort and exactitude that has gone into making these.
I still think if you want to give someone a really special dinner, you know, injecting lamb leg with whiskey 8 days, that's the way to do it. That's the way to impress someone.
It's actually not, I mean, it's not that hard to do. It's just you can't just buy it on a Thursday for them on a Saturday. But it was, I mean, it tasted amazing. It was really a different taste, and it wasn't difficult. But what I was wanting to do was kind of make things that you could do at home, that you then, the idea was then you could look at your own food and go, well, I should put some whiskey in that and see what that's like, and I like it. Because the one I noticed the most, that you get the most out of, is actually just mushrooms and butter and whiskey. If you use mushrooms, butter, whiskey, if you want to use a bay leaf, use a bay leaf, or don't, salt and nothing else, and use different whiskies, people will be convinced of you have put in a load of secret herbs and spices that you're just not telling them about. Because the residuals you'll get from something like a Valveni and the residuals you'll get from a Lafroig or a Lagavulin are so different that people will be utterly convinced that you've put in a completely different thing.
Going back to this idea that a lot of the mythology of whiskey, or the ownership of whiskey, is seen maybe by small groups of enthusiasts who think that they are the sane ones and that everyone else perhaps just doesn't know as much as them. But the industry itself, as you point out, is massive. And I don't think I even realised, I mean, I knew it was a huge industry, worldwide industry, but I mean, we always concentrate on oil, you know, being the possible saviour of Scotland, but whiskey's right up there, isn't it? It's
the third biggest industry in Scotland.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a massive industry. That was the thing, you forget how much money the whiskey industry makes. I mean, if you go to Ireland, you look at those distilleries, the amount of money that those distilleries are making for the exchequer are absolutely phenomenal. And that was the thing, you do forget, you just take it for granted. But you know, everybody knows, you go abroad anywhere strange, and the first thing everybody says is, well, do you have whiskey? You're from Scotland. That is the only thing they know, and they all want Johnny Walker or Chivas. And you forget, like, you know, I mean, 90% of the sales of Scotch whisky around the world are blended whiskey. It's not malt whiskey. Malt whiskey is increasing massively in the States and in lots of places, but also you forget how much whiskey, Scotch whiskey, in a lot of countries is a big symbol of luxury. It's a symbol you've arrived. So if you're Chivas or your Diageo and you're looking at your Johnny Walker brands or your Chivas Regal brands, before you even look at your marketing in a country, what you're looking at is what their GDP is doing. Because if their GDP goes up, your sales go up. Because you might not be able to afford a Mercedes, you might not be able to afford a Rolex, but you can afford a proper bottle of Johnny Walker Red or Chivas Regal, and that is you arrived. You can kind of, what's the word? You can sort of like show that off amongst your friends at a party that you have a proper bottle of Johnny Walker or Chivas Regal.
Well, you've got a story in the book about an Indian wedding, I think, where the symbol of, you know, this is a wealthy wedding is a bottle of whiskey on the table. The table, and it's Johnny Walker, I think, that they are.
Well, I mean, I know Indian friends of mine always say Johnny Walker is the unofficial national drink of India.
But that makes the point brilliantly. And also, we have kind of concentrated so much recently on the mythology of malt whiskey, and they're being made in, you know, small distilleries, now not so small distilleries, a lot of them, but there's a kind of romance about that. But the bulk of the whiskey is still mass produced in big warehouses, and you go to Kilmarnock at one point, kind of, which was Diageo's. It's not there.
No, it's not there anymore. But I mean, a lot of these big names started off as grocers, and I didn't really appreciate how much whisky that we know in Scotland is actually a 19th century invention, like bagpipes and tartan. And in terms of the thing that really took off the whisky industry was blended whisky, which was grocers started off doing that. So a lot of them are learning how to blend tea, and distilleries didn't sell bottles. Distilleries would make the whisky and then wouldn't really bother. Someone would have to come up and get it in their own barrel.
Right.
So this whole idea of like whisky being finished in certain barrels or then being taken off a still and put into a barrel, if you were running a grocer's in Kilmarnock like John Walker was, he would send up his barrels to these distilleries, bring them down and then mix them into his own whisky in a way that his grocers liked. And his customers, his grocer shop liked that kind of whisky. I mean, that is how a lot of things started. I mean, cream sherry is the same thing.
Right.
Because different types of sherry were arriving in barrels in Bristol, and they were making it into what they called milk sherry.
Right.
Because it was just this mixture, and sometimes the colour of it could be almost like milk. Until Harvey's, the grocers Harvey's were making this. The rumour, the story, it's probably not true, but I mean, it's a good lie, so it doesn't really matter. They were saying, oh, well, this is your sherry is surely the cream of all the sherries in Bristol, so this was how sherry became Bristol cream sherry.
Okay.
And
interesting.
And again, I think that comes from tea. People were learning how to blend tea. So John Walker's son Alexander had learned how to blend tea in Glasgow and went back to Kilmarnock and then started making it a wholesale business. And then it just took off, like a lot of them did. I mean, that was the thing about the travelogue, was I went to Kilmarnock on a wet Sunday in January so that no one else ever has to go. Because again, you kind of have this whole mystery of let's go round fantastic places in the sun and sit outside distilleries by the water with mountains.
Yeah.
But
the sun's glinting off your glass and all that kind of stuff.
And there's a rainbow because the rain's just stopped and you're having like the mountain dew and it's all this nonsense. And a lot of whisky was just was made by big industry.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of being put into barrels, in terms of then being bottled. I mean, and even when you look at whisky in the 19th century, I mean, these guys were doing really heavy jobs. I mean, if you're standing there turning barley every single day, that was a hard labouring job.
Yeah.
It wasn't romantic. It was hard going. And Coopers had their health ruined really, really quickly because they were making up barrels, but they were being paid per barrel, and there was absolutely no attention being paid to health and safety. So these guys were ruining their health really quickly with all the industrial injuries.
So it was another kind of heavy industry that was really detrimental to the health of the people that worked on it.
I mean, so were the coppersmiths. I mean, one of the things I did, and I went with my dad, I went to the Diageo coppersmiths, Abercrombie's at Alloa, and the guy taking us round is Charlie King. He runs it, and he kept going on and on and on about health and safety. And one of the things they did that I didn't put in the books, he told me about this later, they had like an anniversary. I can't remember what it was, like 250 years or something like that. It was a special anniversary. I said, and the thing that really made a lot of the guys that worked with him really look was when these retired guys who'd worked there their whole lives came back, and he meant the state of their health. And he would say, and as soon as they left, he said, to his workers, this is why I'm so paranoid about your health and safety. I don't want you to be like that when you're 65. I do not want you to be hobbling along and falling apart because you've been working in these copper stills your entire lives. This is why I worry about these things.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It is a travelogue, and in that travelogue, it takes you to places that you perhaps don't expect to be related to whisky in any way. Airdrie being one of them. Yeah.
And then we went to Alloa and I went to Wishaw, which are not.
Wishaw, sorry.
But they're not the first places that people expect when you're going. I'm going on a whisky tour.
Absolutely.
They kind of think of romantic space side of the Highlands, or maybe you could get to Isla or get to Arran and places like that. No one expects to be in Wishaw and Alloa.
But in doing so, you kind of touch on the social history of this industry and how it's kind of affected. It's got this sense of being really important to Scotland, but there's a kind of like oil and like coal and like all of these things, there's a real social history behind that as well.
I think there is. I mean, there is definitely, and it isn't just pretty nice picture postcard stuff. There was always a lot of quite heavy industry involved with whiskey. Although distilling, the actual act of distilling, is not necessarily a heavy industry thing.
Yes.
But if you've got to dry peat, if you've got to dry barley on a big scale, that required a lot of coal fires. That was a really big, thing to do. It wasn't as hot as welding or steelwork, but it was still a really hot, heavy job.
So why do you think that whiskey has travelled the world as it has? I mean, a lot of spirits do, obviously vodka and gin and everything like that, but there is something about the status of whiskey. I mean, it was huge in Japan. I don't know if it still is, but
it still is.
And then, as you say, in America, malts. And there seems to be something about it that almost places it above these other national spirits.
Historically, I'd say that there was quite a big combination of factors, and one of the ones that you can't ignore at all is colonialisation. That if you have a big colony, you have a big market, and if you go even to somewhere that was relatively speaking nothing in the colonies in inverted commas, somewhere like Sri Lanka, which essentially was just the Port of Colombo as a way for people to stop off before they went to Australia.
Yeah.
You go there, you get a load of expats, they're the ones in control, and the Scots are drinking whiskey. That becomes something that you want to emulate. So there is the not very brilliant, the not brilliant side of our history, which Empire did a massive thing for us. But also, there were these guys in the 19th century, people like Alexander Walker's son, John Walker's son, and then James Buchanan, and they're called the whiskey barons and Tommy Dewar. These, those whiskies that you just hear Dewars, you hear like famous Grouse, Matthew Cloak. These people were travelling around the world at a time when there was these kind of big international exhibitions had started. So there'd be one in Paris, there'd be one in Buenos Aires, and they would go to them all and sell their whiskey as a luxurious product from this tartan-clad, lock-sided, full of ghosts, castle-ridden land, and everybody would buy it. And they were selling it they were doing it really, really well as luxury products. They were not bringing the price down. Someone told me when I was doing this research, I say research a lot, but it was just kind of going around Scotland on buses getting drunk. But I was doing research, and some of it was, I mean, being in Kilmarnock on a Sunday isn't something I'd recommend. But I had a lot of fun doing a lot of other things. But talking to some people, they were saying about how there are letters from agents in Australia to, I think it's James Buchanan, saying, your stuff's too expensive, can you bring the price down? He wrote back, went, no, if people want it, they'll pay for it. And it becomes that luxurious brand that
so it keeps it as a luxurious brand, that's it.
And the other thing I've noticed a lot about the industry, and I'm sure, is how well they are at working together. Because I would compare it to the only one I know, which is like the cava industry, and the cava industry massively buggered up.
Right.
Cordogne and Freixenet, who were the two big players in the Catalan cava industry, rather than facing to the public really well and selling their product as a luxury brand, hated each other so much that they were undercutting each other in supermarkets in Britain and in Germany. So cava became this thing that everybody thinks of as lower quality.
Yeah.
Whereas Prosecco is really, and Cava's much nicer than Prosecco. Prosecco didn't. They might all be stabbing each other in the back, but face to the public, and face to the foreigners, and face to the market. They're all big smiles and pulling together. The whiskey industry is amazing at pulling together. It's amazing at keeping their brand up. They create lots of organisations that keep their brand up and keep their name going. And they're really, even now when you look at, they're really big on hospitality and generosity, so that their name is kept up there. I mean, the kind of best example for a punter in the inverted commas would be going to the Scotch Whisky Experience.
Right.
It's right beside Edinburgh Castle, so it's one of the top tourist spots in Scotland. And you would expect, right beside the top tourist spot in any country, that whatever you were getting, food and drink, would be a total rip-off, would be incredibly expensive. The Scotch Whisky Experience is owned by basically every single Scotch producer.
Right.
They get involved in it.
Okay.
The prices in the bar are probably only lower maybe in the pot still, and even then they're possibly even lower than the pot still, because they're not interested in you buying their whiskey and making that £5-6 off you in the Scotch whisky experience, they want you to go home and buy the whisky.
Yeah.
None of it, because they're owned by every single person in the whisky industry, they have got no interest in pushing a brand on you. Their interest is getting you to find out what you like and sticking with it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was business genius, because it's an area, it's a place that is total rip-off merchant tourist place.
Absolutely, yeah, and you could really take the mickey out of that.
You could be. You're charging £3.50 for drams that in London are like £9.
Yeah.
They could be charging £12 for £3.50 drams,
Yes.
and they're not. And it made me one of those things. I looked at it and I just thought, this is how clever you people are. This is how much vision you have of their enemy, in inverted commas. Their competition is still the competition, but actually the big competition is vodka, gin, bourbon. So they all have to club together to be better than vodka, gin and bourbon.
Yeah. So is the wheel going to work together because there's actually room for all of us, rather than one wanting to be the kind of king of the whole?
I don't think it's as nice as I'm saying. I do think there are a lot of issues that people have. And I do think, they have a lot of issues with, just for example, the amount of money that Diageo has and how much it dominates the market and how much it dominates the malts and how they centralised everything. They got rid of a lot of jobs in Kilmarnock.
Yes.
Nothing in Johnny Walker's used. Nothing about Johnny. There is nothing of Johnny Walker production or bottling or anything in Kilmarnock anymore. Mm-hmm. Everything is now in Menstrie. It's, to put it mildly, not perfect.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you are a wee distillery and a brand new distillery opening up, your market is open because Diageo spends an awful lot of money doing its Formula One, sponsoring its Formula One in India. You just need a website, and people that like Scotch whisky will find you and buy your whisky.
Yeah, that's
because Diageo has spent a fortune promoting Johnny Walker in Delhi that year.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Which I found, that was the thing I thought about it, was how good an industry it was for doing that, and how much other industries could learn. I've been back to Barcelona since I've done the book, and I'm saying to people, really, the Cava people should just go and spend a month talking to everybody in the Scotch whisky industry and go back and go, we have to do it like this, we have to do it like this. They won't, because they're not like that. But
yeah, historically.
But it's just really interesting to see how much there's that whole thing. One of the other things that historically happened with whisky was phylloxera, which destroyed all the vineyards in France in the late 19th century, and because of that, the brandy is obviously made from grapes. So,
of course.
And most of cognac, their vineyards were destroyed. So people needed to drink something else, and the French started getting into whisky, and French per head drink more malt whisky even than us.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. They drink as much malt whisky in a month as they do cognac in a year.
And that's just from that period? You think it's just kept on
just
going?
Started and again, Scottish people are good at business, especially abroad. We might not be so good at it here when we stay here, but people see opportunities abroad.
Yeah.
And the French start buying, the first thing you're going to do is work out how you're going to sell them more.
Yeah. So that's how well we've kind of sold it to the world. How do you think the attitudes to not just whisky, but kind of drink in general in Scotland now? There's this idea that's increasingly problematic, our relationship with alcohol, and if it was 2 weeks' wages for a bottle of whisky back in the day, it's certainly not that now.
If you look at whisky, the cheapest bottle of whisky you could probably get would be in Aldi's, and it would be like $13.99.
Probably. Yeah.
What minimum wage is $6.80? So it's 2 hours' wages.
Yeah. What a change that is.
It is a massive change. I think we seem to have a bigger problem with obesity than we actually do with drinking. And the thing about drinking is we are at least in Glasgow, we're binge drinkers. We're not. And apparently someone was saying that there was a programme that they had of twins.
Right.
They were doctors, and they were doing this whole thing of they had this amount of alcohol to drink a week, and one of them drank every day and one of them drank all in one time, and it didn't make any difference to their health in terms of whether you drink like 20 units a week or whether you drink 20 units on the Friday.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't make a difference to your health. It makes a difference to your head and
Sure.
the fact that you'll end up probably being sick on Saturday morning, but it doesn't make a difference to your actual long-term health. I think we've always had a long tradition of getting drunk.
Yes.
I mean, you read the old Marion McNeill books about sort of 18th century Highland hospitality and servants moaning that things aren't what they were because the gentlemen are not needing to be carried to bed.
Yes.
And I think also the thing I felt, even just from reading about kind of Scottish history with drink, was that in the 18th century, when it was rich people in Edinburgh getting drunk, it wasn't a problem. When it started being poor people in Glasgow getting drunk, then that was a massive problem. Mm-hmm. And I think drink is a problem. I think emotional depression is more of a problem. I think if a Brazilian friend of mine moved here in about 2000, and the thing that always amazed him, he said, if you go to a club in Scotland, everybody's getting drunk and then they all start pulling each other, whereas in Brazil, we all try and pull each other, then we drink.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I was like, why would you try and pull somebody sober?
Yeah.
They might
How
say,
do you pull somebody sober?
Exactly. Like, what kind of nonsense is that? What kind of monsters are you when you start pulling people sober? And he just went, this is amazing, this is what you do. And he went, we just don't do that, we do it the other way around. And I do think, though, I think there's an increasingly younger generation who are looking to drink more quality stuff and drink less.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I think that is a good thing. I do think there is a thing of drink less and drink better. You know, like, don't drink the 12.99 bottle of whiskey. Go and spend 40 quid on a bottle of whiskey and drink and take the length of time to drink it that you would take to drink 4 bottles of 12.99 whiskey. Just have one. And I do think it is getting better, but I do still think it's a problem. But I also do think one of the biggest problems about the problem people have with drunkenness, inverted commas, is poverty. It's not drunkenness. If you solve people's poverty problems, you wouldn't have the same level of drunkenness. And again, drunkenness is only a problem when poor people do it. When rich people and middle class people get drunk, no, it's not a problem.
Yeah. And I think that also is similar to the attitude to food. You know, whenever there's food scares, and the most recent one this week was about bread, I just happened to be listening to this on the radio, and people start saying, well, you know, you should be making your own bread, and you think, well, you know, come on, you're talking to people who, one, don't have the knowledge, the money, or the inclination to bake bread every morning, and it's often the things that are attacked are the cheap foods that, you know, people maybe can't afford to have other things. And it seems to me this is another attack when if it was to be used in our Heston Blumenthal recipe, whatever is being under attack, then it's kind of celebrated as readjusting it. But when suddenly health scares happen, it's usually that end of the market.
Well, I mean, it's to do, you know, there was another thing about ultra-processed food was a word that somebody invented about 3 weeks ago and has now been in the Guardians about every day. And, you know, when it's another stick to beat poor people with. It really is. And it's a whole personal responsibility thing. And I don't think I don't think personal responsibility works when you're in a particular culture. I mean, if you lived in Spain, because they didn't have the Industrial Revolution, their poor were agricultural, so they have a thing of when you have more money, you have more food. Mm-hmm. So when you looked at when their economy was booming, everybody was buying expensive ham, expensive wine, expensive cheese. They were going to expensive restaurants. They were spending their money on food the way that we were buying stuff. We were going to Asda, we were buying bigger TVs, we were going on better holidays, we were getting more into debt, we were buying bigger cars, because we don't have a culinary culture. We have a acquisition culture. We need more things.
Yeah, you almost say we'll go without so that we can have whatever the latest thing is.
And whereas with Spanish people, also because their houses are small, and there's a lot more reasons than just they've got a food culture. But there was a big thing of we get better food. So when their economy collapsed, the thing that really, really took a big hit was the ham industry, as in like the expensive ham industry. All these people were all of a sudden left with all these hams, and I mean a lot of them. It was a big industry. Were like, what in the name of God do we do now? Which is why you can now, for years you could get them for like 30-40 quid in places like Aldi, because Aldi would just buy them, and people were just trying to get rid of them because the Spanish didn't have the money to buy them anymore. And I don't think we had that. You know, we don't. I mean, and the French have that as well. You look, I mean, people who are not rich in France will have been to restaurants. So people of the same social and class background in Scotland would never dream of spending that in a restaurant.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. that I found that I think we have a problem with food in what we're trying to do in terms of kind of trying to change the food culture, and I don't know what we do about it. Because the thing I really realised was whiskey doesn't have a class. There is an assumption that if you have more money, you will drink better whiskey no matter what class you come from, in a way that you would only be from a certain class if you were going to start drinking more expensive red wine and getting really into red wine. I mean, I was in a wine tasting in London just before Christmas, and there was a guy there, and he was talking in a really loud voice, as men like him want to do. And obviously he went to Oxbridge, and obviously it's very important in his own head, and he was having this really loud conversation with another posh woman across the table about how him and his son were almost having competitive translations of the book of John from ancient Greek for fun.
Okay.
And I could not stop laughing. I had to actually leave, because I just was like, you see, you don't get that in a whiskey tasting, and look at you, and you're wearing red trousers. I mean, all I'd need to do is put this on video, and it would be this is your wine wank. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, yeah, we're all right.
This is what wine has become, in a way that whiskey, you just expect to be people who, if they've got more money, they'll buy more whiskey. In a way that you don't expect them to go to better restaurants or buy better food.
Yes. I think that's very interesting. I think, if you go to Italy anytime, I've been to Spain, and you have these lovely markets which still thrive with fresh produce. Glasgow used to have them, now empty, or got restaurants in them, the cheese market, fruit market, and all of these places. And somewhere along the line, the importance of these things kind of disappeared, as you said, or maybe replaced by other.
I do think it is less in Spain than it was. A lot more markets are becoming places to eat, and I do think there's a thing that is always very nice to say, oh, they eat fresh, they eat that, but their women are at home because of the misogynistic dictatorship that they had, and as women weren't allowed to work. I mean, when I lived in Spain in the 90s, it was kind of like being in Barcelona, not so much, but if you were in smaller places like Santander or kind of even Girona or Tarragona, the women ran the house, and by the time they got to 49, they were all on really heavy medication. I mean, they were all on tranquilizers, because they were like, this has been my entire life. And I think if nobody's in the house all day, I think there are a lot of these fantasies about this is all the fresh food that people make. And even markets are still a big thing in Barcelona, but if you go around the non-tourist ones, if the Boqueria is just nothing like it was, because it's just full of tourists. But if you go to a place that's a residential place and you look around, their opening hours have changed, what they sell has changed, and there still are more and more places where people are going out and eating. Because no one makes croquetas at home anymore, because they are a total faff to make. But croquetas were what you made when you'd had the meat on the Sunday, or you'd had the meat on the Saturday, and you had it left over, and you'd make a big bechamel sauce, you'd put in whatever, either the chicken or the ham or whatever you'd had, and then you'd let it settle, and then the next day you'd put them into balls, put them in egg, and put them in breadcrumbs. I mean, who has the time to do that anyway? No one does that anymore. I mean, even I don't do that anymore, and I cook all the time. I end up sometimes making the bechamel sauce, and I think, oh, bugger this, and put it in the freezer, and then never use it. So I come to places like we're in a Spanish restaurant right now. Like, I come to Iberica and have croquetas in Spain. People go to places now to eat that kind of food. So they are changing, and not necessarily for the better, but I think we could learn from them how they manage that change. And I don't know what we do about food culture, because this was the thing. When I was in Spain, I realised I was talking to people. I think I was talking in a radio programme about the book, and I realised that what I had done, and they completely understood my book. Like, for them, it was just, that would be the most obvious way to write about Scotland, would be writing about whiskey and writing them and putting recipes in and going around Scotland and learning these things. And I realised I'd written an old-fashioned Spanish food book about Scotland and whiskey, because old-fashioned Spanish food books were, go here and this is what it's like, and you eat this or you drink this, this is what you have, and what fun it is. And this was the thing that I wanted to kind of get, this idea of, like, conviviality is alive in Scotland. It's just not around food. And if you want to change the food culture, hitting people over the face about what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. And I get some people are really, really on the breadline, but not everybody is. But still, hitting people over the face at what they should be eating, what they shouldn't be eating, isn't going to work. You somehow need to give people some kind of grounding and kind of confidence. Even you know, almost in the way that they have a grounding in a competence about whiskey, even if it is that thing of I think I'm doing this wrong, they know there is a way to do it.
Yes, aye, yeah.
So it's like, I think I might be doing this food wrong because I know there's a way that could be doing it. I think my diet might be wrong because I know there is a way that I could change this, that does not involve feeling guilty, does not involve being wrong, involves somehow wanting to change because it's a good idea.
Yeah, and you can see it's beneficial and learning something new. But food in Scotland, certainly in the last decade there's definitely been a change. Perhaps only in the major cities, but I mean, I'm thinking of how Finnieston in particular, Glasgow, has changed. Perhaps the most dramatic change of all, whereas you have all these new restaurants opening up, and they seem to be doing something that Scotland didn't do previously. I mean, it can be taken to extremes. I think there's an avocado restaurant in Finnieston.
Oh, that's sad.
Called Avo. I believe that. It might be a joke. I
hope it is. Oh, that is just sad.
But what do you think? Do you think that all the time you've been kind of writing about food, that you've seen that side of Scottish food change, the kind of restaurant side?
I think the restaurant side's changed, but it's not anywhere near the way that it is elsewhere. I think it's a lot better, but I still do think too much of our ideas about food, our food culture, is still kind of comedic defiance. Although I think as a lessening of that, I do think there was that whole, you want us to eat deep fried pizza, we're going to eat it all the time. Munchie box, the how bad can your food be?
Sure.
I think that has changed. And I do think the comedic defiance should almost be, well, we're supposed to be the sick man of Europe, but guess what, we're not.
Yeah.
Which I think would, somehow you need to kind of make people want to go, hold on, I'm going to be healthy. I mean, I'm not supposed to be, so fuck you, I'm going to be healthy.
Yeah, sure.
Which would,
instead of actually going, you want me to be unhealthy, I'll show you how
I will deep fry my pizza and I will eat a munchie box because you think I shouldn't be healthy, so I'm going to be even more unhealthy. Whereas, and somehow we need to kind of change that way of thinking to go, you know, I'm going to be healthy because that is really going to piss you all off. And I think Scottish people are very good at being contrary.
Yes.
And somehow it could be almost, annoy the world by being really healthy.
You could say that was sort of the success of the Glasgow when it was the city of culture, so long ago now, was it say, you say we're not culture, but we'll show you we do have culture.
Which I think,
actually that's stuck, I think.
And I think we need to do that, and somehow we need to do that with food.
Yeah.
The thing I notice is that people are willing to try things, and I think people are willing to enjoy themselves, but I still do think we still don't have that deep culture. I mean, you go outside of, say, Glasgow and Edinburgh, and like there's kind of one restaurant in Inverness. Somewhere like Skye has been really successful, but that's very much on the tourist trail. But I still, and I do think, I mean, and then again, I don't think the food people that do a job are celebrated enough. I think in a country that really appreciated its food, Shirley Spear would be worshipped as a god.
Yeah.
Because Shirley Spear was the person that really, kind of started off that change in Skye. She didn't do it all by herself, but she was the one that got that going. She went somewhere and she did stuff that no one was doing, and then it became something possible. And now Skye is kind of a world-renowned restaurant destination. I mean, who would have thought that?
Well, that shows you what can be done, I think.
But again, if you want me to be negative, it's like, well, why does Shirley not have flowers thrown in front of her every time she walks down the street? Why is she not revered?
I mean, perhaps it's a bit like the knowledge of whiskey. Most people in the country, they don't have the knowledge, whereas when certainly Skye's all known now globally as a kind of destination for food. Maybe just never crosses people to. I mean, you're right, the people in the know should be promoting folk and saying, look, this is worth shouting about, so let's shout about it. But sometimes we're not very good at that.
No, I think also we're not, like our chefs don't have big names. Yeah. And I also think because they're not seen as cultural figures, and I do think it's a very British Isles thing. I have this friend that's moved from France back to Ireland. She was in France for about 25 years, and we have very similar conversations about what we think some of the issues are. And she says, chefs in France are revered as cultural figures. They're not celebrities. They're not TV people. They might do a TV programme, and she said almost they might deign to do a TV programme, but they're seen as massive cultural figures. It's not like you have an entertainer who instead of presenting the one show is a chef doing cooking.
It's not Ainsley Harriott, it's more kind of Andrew Fairley or something like that. No,
I wouldn't say Andrew Phillips. It's almost like it's more when you have an artist who will decide that they're going to do a TV programme. It's like they have decided to allow a TV programme to be done around them.
Yeah, sure.
Almost. I'm trying to think. So something like Val McDermott, the last time she did Art Scotland.
Yes.
This was like great because Val McDermott had almost allowed herself to be persuaded to do a TV programme.
Yeah.
Whereas we have, James Martin and Ainsley Harriott. I don't think they do a bad job, but they don't do a cultural job.
Yeah.
It's very much a lifestyle job, which then becomes very frivolous. In a way, if you look at our newspapers, it's a lifestyle section, and Scottish culture isn't very good at the kind of namby-pamby lifestyle stuff at all. So then it doesn't know what to do. And the other thing I'd say that we need to work our way around, that Scottish food culture is not just this is our larder.
Yes.
We need to work our way out of that because your larder's your larder, what you do with it's important.
Yeah,
and
sure.
You sometimes get these programmes, or you read chefs and they go, well, this is Scottish, so therefore it'll be great because it's Scottish. And this is a lemon, it's not from Scotland. Somehow you've failed. I don't really want to eat a lemon from Scotland.
Yes.
We have been importing lemons for a very long time, and I think having lemons from elsewhere is a very good thing. I mean, who would want to eat a lemon grown in Scotland? How much environmental impact would it be to create conditions enough to have a lemon tree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. But there is an obsession, I think. The mantra is, use good local produce, and that's great when there is good local produce. But sometimes it's okay to,
get other stuff. I mean, our cream is amazing. Our fish is amazing. Now because there's no Clydeside tomatoes, our tomatoes aren't that great. I mean, there's a few places, but it's not that easy to get them.
Yeah.
And I just think I don't really know what we do until somehow we sit down and go, how do you make food as important as the arts? There's a thing.
Absolutely.
There's a thing if you talk to any writer or any artist in Catalonia who of any renown, there is an assumption that they know about food and wine. Not as much as an expert, but there's an assumption that they have a working knowledge of that because food and drink is part of culture, and if you're a writer or if you're an artist then you're interested in culture in general. I wouldn't say that was an assumption made of any artist in Scotland that they would know about food. They might happen to like about food, but you'd assume much more they'd know about football.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Than they would know about food.
Yeah.
And if they knew about food and drink, it would be whiskey. You would never assume that they knew about wine.
Or that they were a cook or that.
There are things that the kind of cultural accoutrements that you would assume of an artist in Scotland are very different from what you'd assume of an artist in Catalonia. And again, I suppose I have this idea that you'd need, if you want to make people want food, if hitting them over the head and telling their lifestyle's wrong is very obviously not working.
Yes. Absolutely.
You somehow need to get them to want to do that, and I do think there must be a cultural thing that you can do.
If you see someone who you admire who is involved in other things, I mean, sport's a good example, something like that, then if they were visual, known for loving their food or eating a certain way or whatever, then you can see that. Well, that's why they get people to. Lloyd Cole was advertising whiskey in Japan in the 80s and 90s because they think, well, that's what we want to do. What they do, but they tend not to do that with food, I think.
No, they don't, and it's one of the things that, and I don't know how you change that. And I'm not sure how much it can be top down. I mean, I really don't have a clue because I have been back in Scotland for 18 months and standing looking. Because in London, where I lived for about 10 years, there's not a food culture. There's a pop culture about food. Food in London is basically the new rock and roll. Right. Everybody that used to want, every kind of upper middle class person with a trust fund that used to want to be in the Beatles now wants to run a food truck or own a restaurant.
Yeah.
Being a chef is the coolest thing that you can do. Knowing about restaurants is the coolest thing that you can know in London. And you can see that a bit of that in Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Yeah.
But I mean, food and restaurants and the pop culture around restaurants will never replace music in Glasgow.
Yes, sure.
And also, a pop culture around going out to restaurants isn't a food culture, it's pop culture, and then it'll change in 20 years to something else. Yeah. If you want to create a food culture, it needs to be what people are doing and eating at home.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing altogether.
Yeah, that whole thing, well, what we're doing tonight, we're going out to a gig, or we're going out to a club, or no, we're going out to a new pop-up restaurant which is opened up, or something like that.
But what are you eating during the week?
Yeah.
And again, it's that. And I genuinely don't know what you do.
Yeah.
That was the thing I kind of realised in the book, that we don't have a food culture at all. We have a drink culture, and it's about conviviality. It's not about getting drunk. Because that was the thing, I think I put it in the book about reading Whiskey Galore and realising how, what a good writer Compton Mackenzie was. I mean, it was not in any way dated.
No.
I mean, and his knowledge of language in terms of how people spoke, like he had, how posh people, the Colonel, the posh guy, how the Cockney guy spoke English, how his mum spoke English, how Gail spoke English was just amazing. But also to me, his brilliant thing was that there was no whiskey on the island, that you couldn't get a wee nip with your pint in the pub was really bad, but that you had no whiskey at home to offer someone when they knocked on your door was a tragedy, because ginger beer and tea wasn't hospitality. Whiskey was hospitality. Now the point was that you could say no. If you came to my house and offered you a whiskey, you could say no, quite the thing, but I had offered you the hospitality. The point, if I didn't have it to offer, it was awful.
It was about identity rather than a need to get drunk.
I mean, and I think when I watched the film again, I don't think the film film didn't get that across the way the book did, of the tragedy of not having hospitality. And I was talking to there's a Northern Irish food writer, Diana Henry, and she was saying, she was like, oh my God, I remember this, right? She says, like, my granddad on his farm, like, somebody walked in, they'd immediately be given a glass of whiskey. It's what you did. And it as soon as you could afford a bottle, it's what you did for people. And I have quite a few bits in that book about kind of like different anecdotes about people and their hospitality and whiskey, and like how you could tell that's what it was.
Well, there's lots of personal anecdotes throughout it, and that's where you do the travel, or you often are with people, or you're going to meet people, or things like that. And that makes it a book that anyone could read, whether you know whiskey or whether you're interested in food or whatever. Everyone, as you say, will have a whiskey tale and will have that idea of sharing food or drink with someone. That, and some of the best nights out I can think of have been nights out restaurants, or nights out the pub, or things like that. So even if we don't take the food side of it as seriously as we should have, it's not as I think everyone still has some stories to tell like that.
And I think everybody has about conviviality and sharing. I mean, my book, I kind of wanted to do a book about travel, but it was kind of that thing of just come here and sit down, get yourself a glass of whiskey, and read this book with a glass of whiskey. I wanted people to read it and think they could do this. Like. Almost, I'm going to go on a wee trip with my pal. Not even, if you live in Australia, you're not going to come to Scotland necessarily and go to Isla, but I'm going to go on a wee trip with my pal. I'm going to get in the car and we're going to go on a wee trip, because I kind of want to do that idea, because of that idea of conviviality, which again, like people like Nestor Locan, who's like an old Spanish, been dead since about the 1980s. He wrote about that. He would go on these journeys, and this idea was he was having fun. You'd read this journey with Nestor, and you think, God, I'd like to go fishing there with somebody. And so many travel books are now about places that are really hard and out of the way. Look at my struggles while I climbed some massive mountain and nearly got shot by people, and you're thinking, that's really nice, but there's no way I'm doing that.
Yeah, sure.
And I wanted to kind of write a travel book of like, well, you could just do this. You just get on a bus and just go somewhere. I mean, it might even be Kilmarnock, but you could just get on a bus and go somewhere and meet a pal or go with a pal, and it could be fun. You could do this. There's no reason why you couldn't.
And it could be a memorable thing that if you ever come to write your own memoirs or books, that these are the days that you'll remember and put in it.
And these are the wee stories that you'll tell people. And there was, one of the best things I ever read about food was Nestor Locan talking about a restaurant in Peníscola in Valencia. One of the things he was talking about, you're gonna eat this food, and you're sitting there and the sun's going down by the sea, because the restaurant was right on the rocks, and you're drinking a glass of wine, and you will wish that your life lasted as long as possible so you could come back and do this again and again and again. And I just thought there is that thing of food and drink where if you're not just standing in a pub drinking really quickly to get really drunk, there is that thing of there are people that you're sitting with thinking, this is the kind of life, this is a life, this is the life that I want. I mean, everybody has a food and drink moment in their life where they're sitting somewhere. It could be fish and chips on a bench, looking out on a promenade, and you've just bought some wine or a can of beer from the supermarket, and you're even drinking out the bottle or out the can, and you're sitting there going, this is a life, this is what I want for my life. And I kind of wanted the book to be a wee bit that kind of idea of you reading this going, actually I'm going to go and do that, because this is that life is easy. I could have days like that. Everybody can have days like that.
It's not huge. It's experience which everyone can have.
And it's not. I mean, none of the people in my book are big, important, fancy people. They're just my pals or my family. None of it's massive, So again, it was that I just wanted it to be an ordinary thing, and I just went on buses and trains. Didn't hire a car.
You certainly could have changed my life by saying whiskey, not port with cheese, and I've stuck to that since. And
it's good, isn't it?
Brilliant, absolutely.
It's so much better.
Certainly with a blue cheese, that's fantastic.
A peated whiskey and blue cheese, I think, is the thing. And if you wanted like a sherry cask whiskey and like a cheddar or a manchego, I think it is much better. But again, it's that thing of that's fun. There's not that idea of doing it wrong. It's like, I'm going to try it and see if I don't like it. Well, I don't like it, but I'm going to try it. And I just think, I mean, there are historical reasons why we drink port, and it's mostly how to piss off the French because of the Napoleonic Wars. So I think the whiskey's much nicer with cheese.
Yeah, it's got a bit of backstory then if that's it, if it's just to piss off the French.
I mean, it is. I mean, in the end, when you look at the Napoleonic Wars, was what happened. The claret industry fell apart. They couldn't get cognac, so they decided to try and get all the English and Scottish by then to drink port.
Now, before we finish, you're also a broadcaster, often talking about food on the radio. One, that says that there is certainly an audience for people to learn more about food. And what kind of state of the nation do you get from talking to people or discussing food on the radio?
Most of the stuff, I think it depends on where you go, and in a good way, I think people are really interested in food and interested in doing things. I think there's the advantage of not having a food culture is an adventurousness of what people who like food are willing to make and willing to do. Yeah, which I think is good. And there's always been that. I think there's been that for a very long time, and adventurous, and I think that other countries don't have, where this is what they eat and they won't eat anything else.
Yeah, and this is how we do it.
I think it really depends where you go, what larders are like and what industries are like. I think I have to say, not in a brilliant way, but if you go anywhere around Britain, everybody seems to have a really dull, grey beef or lamb stew. Everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. They're like, oh, we've got this local thing, and you're like, and I bet you it's a brown stew
with a carrot and a
with a carrot and an onion. But I do think that there's an awful lot going on. I do think there's a new thing of a lot of really good food producers, and again, they're not cheap.
Yes.
But you get a good food producer that isn't cheap, and they're not made. And this is again, you kind of have to get people around the idea that you can buy cheese for £1.50 for 400 grams, and you can buy it for £10.50 for 400 grams, and there's a big difference. But one of the big differences is that that cheese that you're making, that is one guy, or one woman, a couple at the most.
Yes.
Doing something and really trying to bring something to an area and revive a cheese or make a new cheese, and it might be worth a wee bit extra your money, not just because of the taste, but also because they are really trying to bring something back to an area. What we have really, really done really well in Scotland is a lot of small smokehouses. Right. There's a really good one in Kirkintilloch, and I now can't remember. Is it Campsie? Campsie Cures, maybe? I can't remember their name. But they do, and I mean, that's just, I think it's just like one woman does it and her daughter helps her. And so, it's not a big outfit, and you buy it, and it's more expensive than buying it in Marks and Spencer's. Sure. When you find her stuff. But it's really, really good, and it's one person doing something that's worthwhile. Yeah. So I do think there is a lot more. There's a kind of an increase in interest in things. Yes. And there is a lot more small producers. And things like the Stranraer Oyster Festival, which they did for the first time last year, you can see there's a desire to kind of create local things. And again, there's a desire to create a tradition. Because the Stranraer Oyster Festival works in 10 years' time, nobody will ever have remembered that there wasn't one every year, because by the time you've been for 10 years, everybody will be like, this must have been going since the 1920s. Like, no, it started in 2017, but no one cares.
Sure.
And so I do think that is getting better. And
maybe that is the way forward. Small book festivals, small film festivals, small arts festivals are kind of thriving and certainly growing in the last few years. And maybe the next step would be more small food festivals celebrating.
But I think there needs to be more small food festivals that aren't just chefs doing demos about fancy food, and also because then what you end up doing is it's not housekeeping food. Everything is just pan fried in the way that a chef does, because our restaurant cooking is very different from home cooking.
Very much so, yeah.
I do think there needs to be more stuff about kind of people cooking together, things like come and cook a big thing with me, as opposed to standing watching you pan, like you get a pan and fry quick
well, I think
duck
that's
breasts.
the problem, because I think food has become a spectator sport in this country a little bit. I watch things go on in the morning and look how they've, whatever they've done.
While I'm sitting here eating my carrier, and if I'm poor it's from Iceland, and if I'm rich it's from Waitrose, and I'm sitting here meeting my microwave meal while watching Rick Stein make some fantastic stuff on the telly.
Yeah.
We used to have a theory that if you want to know what a country doesn't do, you watch its telly. So we reckoned that the British never cook.
Yes.
The Germans don't really actually do that much sport, and the Spanish never have sex. And then it turned out we were right, because they did all these surveys, and a survey every single year would turn out that the Spanish had the least sex out of anybody in Europe. I used to have this friend of mine who was utterly personally insulted every single year. And I'd be like, well, you have to go home and like do it more with your wife, and then you can like push up the average.
Well, Rachel, thanks very much for talking to us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll be back soon with something completely different. Cheers.